Gather round me, children, I'll tell you the news. Don't worry about the names or dates, you already know it's true. The doctor hates your baby, the prime minister's a ghost, and all them folks are sailing here 'cause they're in love with boats. Superfoods can save us from all our evil sin. JFK and Elvis own a bar in Wisconsin. And vaccinations were created by the CIA to steal votes from Bernie Sanders and turn your babies gay. So click the link you think you like and get tooled for a fight against those lefty fascist communists who are leaning too far right.
Hi and welcome to Not Another Fake Newscast. I'm Paul.
And I am Jerry.
So we've got lots of things to cover here first. A couple of things we have to discuss is the fact that we've not had an episode in what feels like forever. We apologise for that.
Profusely.
If anyone had seen our social media post, essentially, without getting too deep into it, I lost vision in an eye for a few weeks through an infection and then a kind of knock-on effect after that, which meant we couldn't do the episode. And then
the day that we were supposed to record, I had to take Paul to the hospital instead.
Yeah, and then the day we had scheduled to record the next time, we couldn't because
I was stuck in an oil rig because of terrible weather. So I just made it home in time for Christmas, and this is just after Christmas. We're recording now.
Essentially, what we're saying here is this episode is cursed like fuck. So
yeah. So if it's awful, then that's why. That's the only reason why.
We've done our studying and stuff. So it's the curse. In fact, what we've managed to do is about an extra fucking 6 weeks worth of fucking studying.
Oh yeah, well, wait to tell them that, Paul. Now you've just ruined their excuse.
Yeah, you make a good point.
Yeah, as always, we are available at our homepage, www.notanotherfakenewscast.com. We're available on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and everything else at PGMcast.
We're on Patreon, and Patreon matters a whole heap to us. It really, really helps us out. It lets us buy our new equipment, like the hopefully silkier sound that we're getting every time that we do the episode, because we're actually starting to learn how to use the equipment that we bought. And yeah, so that's patreon.com/PGMcast, and anything that you can do to help us there. And in exchange, you get a chance to come and talk to us live all the time on a Discord server where you can hear us say all sorts of horrendous things and talk to some really great people. I mean, our Patreons are really great people.
Yeah, they are. And, big shout out to our new patrons that we have. Now Give Me a Fries. We've got Lee Reck on there now as well.
Blake as well.
Blake, yeah, thanks very much for getting involved, and we really appreciate all your support always. This is a Beer 52 production. We are sponsored by an awesome beer company that are based out of Edinburgh, and what they will do is once a month they will deliver you a box of beer. All different flavours and for all over the world.
For money.
Yeah, well, for money. Apart from if you go to beer52.com and you use the code fake news, you'll get your first box for absolutely free. We'll
put the link for the page. There's a drop page for us. We'll put that at the bottom of our episode as ever, so you can click on that. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, who doesn't like getting beer and snacks delivered to their house once a month?
Yeah, and you get a sweet magazine if you're into like beer and
if you're
heavy
into beer, like Johnny the Disaster Artist. He loves brewing.
Yeah. He'd enjoy it. It's called Ferment. Anyway,
not for men.
No, not for men. Although they're equal opportunities, I believe. Beer 52. They're not the patriarchy.
Yeah, down with them. Down with them. Not Beer 52 again. Down with the patriarchy.
Yeah, definitely.
Up with Beer 52.
Yeah, up with Beer 52. So, moving swiftly on, this episode is going to be about a very festive subject, North Korea.
Yeah, that's what they say. It's nothing, chestnuts roasting in the open fire, mince pies.
Nip it at your nose.
and totalitarian governments that are taking advantage of their
nuclear warheads raining down on your head.
Chestnuts roasted by the nuclear fallout.
Yeah, so obviously they've been in the news quite a lot recently. It's kind of It's came at around the same time that we've managed to kind of conquer ISIS, and the Middle East isn't so much of a big issue. So we need to have a new
We
enemy.
conquered ISIS.
Yeah, like, you not remember, Paul? You were pretty drunk.
Yes, so it happens. Couple of beers in me, and the next thing you know, I'm going to overthrow terrorism.
But the new old enemy, they've kind of been there for a little while, is North Korea at the moment. That's the big one everyone's talking about. And obviously, as the rhetoric is ramped up on either side, so have the nuclear tests and the UN sanctions. So we wanted to dive into kind of the history of North Korea, what's happening there now, what's been happening for the past sort of 60 odd years, and talk about where we've got to and where we're going.
I mean, a question that I will pose now, and we can maybe talk about later on in the episode, is: does America and the Western allies, but America driving that, have any right, really, to tell another country they can't have nuclear weapons?
When they have
fucking
6,800 nuclear warheads.
Give or take. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so do they have that right? I mean, like, I know, they're testing nuclear weapons and they might shoot them at someone, but surely anyone who has nuclear weapons might shoot them at someone. But we've got a good list and a bad list. Like, essentially, like Santa Claus, essentially we've got like a nice list and a naughty list. Let's keep this fucking festive.
So yeah, the nice countries, they're allowed nuclear weapons, but the bad ones aren't. I'd be in favour of, getting rid of all of them, but then that leaves you open to the same argument as gun control, I suppose, in the US. If we get rid of all the guns, then the bad guys will still have guns. I suppose nuclear weapons, you could argue, still work in the same way, but we'll get onto that later. Let's start off by looking at how North Korea and South Korea came to be.
Let's go back, all the way back.
To the 50s.
To the 50s? No, to before the 50s.
All right, we're going further back. So, on you go.
Yeah, so, I mean, essentially, Korea existed. Korea's always had a very weird and jaded past. Korea has been ruled by the Russians, the Japanese, the Americans, the Japanese, Chinese, the Japanese, briefly by the Koreans, the Americans, the Japanese, the Russians. There's been a theme, but essentially there's been a lot of people that have been fighting over what is actually a relatively small piece of land in the grand scheme of things. It just holds arguably a tactical significance to the countries that weren't China and that weren't Russia. So
but also to China and Russia.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I mean, essentially because of where it sits, someone like Japan then had something mainland on Asia, which borders the two largest countries that are there. I mean, same with America. America obviously then had a foothold in the area that borders the two largest countries.
It was of strategic military importance to the US, certainly. So like, we kind of go back all the way to the beginning. So let's start at 1910. From 1910 until the Second World War, Korea was owned or certainly was occupied by Imperial Japan. And at the end of World War II, that was when the US and her allies kind of moved in. Russia came in from the north. And
that's correct. So we'll quickly, so there's a little bit before that. So essentially in 1910, when the Japanese are overthrown, there was a brief area of time where Korea was in charge of Korea. Essentially, the Koreans were in charge of their own country, and there had been a bit of turmoil. Now, at that time, there was a lot of nationalistic pride because suddenly you had a country that hadn't been a country before. And there was a man who has a history worth touching on, called Syngman Rhee. Now, I may not be pronouncing that correctly, but
I think Syngman Rhee looks about right to me.
So, no need to rap at me. You know what I mean? Didn't realise we were going full Dr. Dre there.
Did I not tell you what I got for Christmas?
How to Rap by
50 Cent.
Brutal.
I know, I don't think my wife loves me that
much.
much.
A great present, dude. So essentially, to give you an idea of where Syngman Rhee came from, he is directly descended from princes of Korea, which as a band were amazing. But yeah, he's kind of part of the aristocracy of sorts in Korea before the Japanese ruled, and through a sequence of events, he ended up being involved in news media and stuff in Korea, and his master, the guy who trained him up, moved to America.
Yeah, and Simon Rhee was part of the nationalist movement in Korea for the whole time that Japan was kind of in charge of them. He was on the sort of political fringes.
Well, he actually got life imprisonment.
Yeah.
For political and military activism. Yeah, and essentially he only got released when Russia entered into Korea, or with the whole of Korea it was at the time, the first time, and he then fled to America. He tried to convince the Americans to help create an independent Korea, and the Americans at that time weren't particularly into it. He swelled up some national pride, but there was a lot of nationalists that pointed out that he was in fucking America and probably didn't have the right to try and drive that.
And at the same time, you had communism spreading around the world, so there was a huge upswell in support of communism in South Korea, in Korea at the time, under the Japanese, which was, kind of obviously being pushed by outside influences of the Soviets and of China.
Well, yeah, I mean, so essentially you had Mao picking up a bit of traction in China, and you had, well, pretty much everyone to do with the royal family in Russia just been murdered like 3 weeks earlier. So things were getting a bit heavy on communism.
But all the way through the Japanese occupation, obviously, communism was sort of becoming more and more prevalent throughout the world.
Yeah, and certainly over in what we'll class for the rest of this chat is about the Eastern Bloc. Do you know what I mean? That entire area was, and that was a direct, because they were under, essentially all of them were under imperialistic rule. Even if you take the UK by this point, the UK by this point had a government that was democratically elected, so they didn't actually have the monarchy ruling the empire, but they didn't have the monarchy interfering in people's lives, whereas pretty much the entire Eastern Bloc was still ruled by old school imperialistic families. I mean, certainly in China, Japan and Russia, which were the biggest powers. So communism is almost the exact polar opposite of that with regards to the opinion of the people and the way that people are being treated. So a lot of people kind of were latching onto that.
You could argue that the Eastern mentality feeds into it perhaps better than a Western mentality traditionally as well, because they do have more of a sense of
the honour system and stuff. I mean, even that, the honour system means that you don't take the piss. The problem when you've got anyone who is mentally westernised applying communism is just like, but you just fuck everybody over. Whereas with the Eastern Bloc mentality, there is a sense of like pride. You know what I mean? There is a sense of.
I think in terms of the East, like Japan, China, all that stuff. Their religions and whatever are much more about your place in the order of things. Like an honour, like you say, is a big issue. Anyway, for whatever reason. Communism grew in China quite heavily.
So the nationalists and the communists clashed, and he actually didn't gain any traction at that point. He then went on to get PhDs and various other degrees. He actually went through a series of events that ended up him getting a PhD at Harvard, I believe.
That's correct, yeah.
And he then managed to, the next time round, he actually went back to Korea, got involved again. There was a bit of an altercation that I believe is called the 105 man event, but it's 105 man is the if you were searching for it online, and you could read all about that. He got imprisoned again, fled to America again, and managed to this time convince Woodrow Wilson to get involved.
Yeah, and so at the end of the Second World War, when we saw Japan defeated in the Pacific War, that was when the Allies, because by that point Russia was allied with the Western forces.
Certainly and very much so with America, more so than anything else. They both had, Russia obviously had first the fear of having to go in to be involved with the fighting with Japan, like on their doorstep, and like Chinese held Japan, and they wanted to fan the flames of communism.
So it was mutually amicable for the Soviets and the US to decide to both go into Korea. Now, the Soviets had much more of a military presence close by to it.
And by that you mean they had a military presence close by.
Whereas the Americans had to send people over there into the south and make their way north. But it was agreed prior to them entering the country that basically the Americans proposed that they would draw a border in their sort of line of operations around about the 38th parallel, and the US requested that the border be north of Seoul because they considered Seoul as a capital to have a strategic advantage, and they wanted it. Now, when they made that suggestion to the Russians, they actually expected it to be knocked back and kiboshed by the Russians, but because Stalin was so keen to not step on any toes and to see an amicable end to the Second World War.
Old amicable Joseph, that's what they called him.
He consented to that agreement, which surprised the Americans but also pleased them. So you ended up at the end of the Second World War, and once the US and the Soviets had went in there, you ended up with a North Korea, largely Soviet controlled, and South Korea, US controlled, and they had a military
Yeah, they essentially had a military leadership. So what they done
and there was a US governor in charge of South Korea, etc., at the very beginning.
Yeah, and Syngman Rhee came with them at that point as well, and he essentially went from being like an advisor to the Americans to being put in power as like a proxy leadership.
Yeah, he was certainly the US's choice of leader. He was right-wing, conservative, very authoritarian in terms of his leadership. So they had a democratic vote in South Korea, and Syngman Rhee was appointed leader.
I mean, but in saying that, prior to him being put in place, the then leadership, the communist leadership of North Korea, did try to have a Korean-wide vote to see, and essentially the Americans put the kibosh on that.
Yeah, they were very much against that.
Because they were scared that first, communism would take grip of Korea, and secondly, the fact that most of the people were probably going to vote for... Because what you have to remember
it would certainly have been unpredictable and quite tight, the vote either way. So the US were not going to...
That's how I like it.
The US were not going to enter into the possibility of losing their strategic foothold in the region by having an unfriendly government.
The dangers there were sound. I mean, like you've got Syngman Rhee, who was a nationalist who fled the country, who became American educated, and wasn't even loved by the nationalists in the country as a whole. And then you had the leadership in North Korea, which was essentially a military leader who had served to protect the country through Japanese rule, who had been involved fighting for communism, granted, but with the Chinese for Mao's armies and stuff like that. I mean, that's
an important point to mention. In the Chinese wars, the Koreans, there had been a large
somewhere between 50 and 70,000 Koreans fought.
Had backed them up, and
20,000 trains worth of materials were sent to China to help them fight. They helped the Red Army fight,
and they'd fought in Manchuria, etc., and they'd won some really strategic battles.
They actually
China's aid.
They actually done more than just fighting in Manchuria. What they done was they allowed non-military civilians to flee in North Korea to be protected. So essentially, they gave refuge. They essentially took in refugees from the country and protected the women and children.
Yeah. That historical debt that China feels towards North Korea for that military intervention and humanitarian intervention is a very important fact, because it leads into why China have protected North Korea in a sense for quite a long time since then.
I mean, I think that's kind of where we're moving towards. That what you have to remember is kind of so quickly about the Korean War. There was a bit of back and forth, and there was a bit of fighting, and essentially because of the intervention of the Russians and the Chinese, the North Koreans were winning that war. They were outright winning the war.
We haven't even got to the start of the Korean War yet, because what happened? What happened was, as you said, the North Koreans were pushing for a countrywide election. The US knocked that on the head. Syngman Rhee was voted to be the leader of South Korea, and he was involved in some pretty nasty shit. I mean, let's get one thing out of the way. North Korea have obviously a history of totalitarian, really poor record on human rights and stuff. And yeah, the most totalitarian state that's ever existed, basically.
Certainly in the history of the last 3-4 generations of people that you'll ever have met, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I can't say that they were definitely worse than, say, I don't know, the Persians or Romans, but certainly, yeah.
I think you can't really compare it to ancient standards, because control of information flow was probably a lot easier back then, because, you know, people didn't have the ability to communicate across continents, etc. But they have done for, you know, the sort of past 40 years at least, and North Korea have prevented that happening in a way that would be fucking virtually, it would be impossible under any other type of government. The reason that I bring it up is because I wouldn't ever want anybody to think that in any way any of the stuff that we're going to say is a defence of North Korea's actions towards their own people or towards other countries in the world in terms of their aggression, etc.
I mean, we're far beyond apologists for North Korea.
Yeah, but what we would like to bring to people's attention is some of the stuff that, like, certainly with Syngman Rhee happened in South Korea when they first went in. So, like, you had things like the Bodo League massacre. They reckon he killed about 30,000 communists.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. Well, see, this is actually the problem as well. It's not even 30,000 communists. It's worse than that. It's essentially 30,000 people who may at some point or another owned a red T-shirt with a yellow star on it. Like, essentially anyone who may have, like, you know, that way when we look at history and you look at, oddly enough, the same time in history in America, and the way that, like, you know, make sure your neighbour isn't a commie.
Yeah, McCarthyism.
Yeah, and essentially it was exactly the same there, and that part of history has almost been whitewashed, where, like, no one really talks about the fact that, like, what North Korea, I mean, like I said, by no means am I an apologist, but North Korea at the time, even though they had a opposing political view to the kind of American-led South Korea, that was really the only issue. They had a military leader that was in charge. They were trying, for the most part, to unify the country, and South Korea were also committing atrocities to the people of South Korea who might have had any sympathies towards North Korea. They were doing things that on a normal day, if both those groups were both allied with us, you know what I mean, if they were both deemed as good people with the same political beliefs, they would be held accountable for their actions, because they were massacring tens of thousands of people in their own country.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff has only recently started to come to light in South Korea, because it's kind of been purged for the history books, but they've started to find mass graves of people that were killed in the 50s by the South Korean US-backed government. And there's evidence, we'll put obviously all the links up for this, but there's evidence that the US were well aware that these purges and massacres were taking place. And, you know, some prominent members of the US government turned a blind eye to it, while others advised them to stop doing it, you know. But there certainly was no action towards them, and they were definitely happy for Syngman Rhee to be in charge. But he had a very authoritarian style, and was committing similar atrocities to what you would have heard about happening in the north.
Yeah. So, I mean, and the thing is, you have to remember that between the pair of them, none of them were particularly great people. The danger was that one of them was coming from a military background with his beliefs and the side of war. The other one was coming with military backing and very well educated background, and that made him more dangerous from a political aspect, and that stood South Korea well. Obviously, if you look at the way the two countries have landed now, like, that was the building blocks for what now then became South Korea.
So, how did all this lead to the Korean War?
So essentially, how it kicked off was after Russia was approached and they were asked if they would get involved with the war. Russia said no, but essentially after Mao...
By Kim Il-sung?
Yeah, by North Korea. But once Mao had secured China, you then had a unified front back. You had a unified back to North Korea, which was both Russia and China both following communism, and they decided at that point that they would be willing to...
all allied.
Yeah, they would support the North Korean communist government and trying to take South Korea which was generally believed by certainly the North Korean government to be split and almost overrun, essentially held again by another foreign country rather than being like, because at that point it was still being ruled by a kind of American military coalition. There is actually an anagram
Well, yeah,
off the top of my head, I can't
because
remember.
there was a US military governor kind of in charge of South Korea prior to the election, and if they have maintained a military presence in South Korea throughout from then until now.
Oh yeah, essentially from about 1948.
There's a specific military body, military intelligence body, and everything for South Korea that is like a US operation. I can't remember the name of it right now, but we'll stick the links up and whatever for that. Anyway, so that happened, and not only were they backing them in terms of politically, in public and whatever, but they were providing
tanks, aircraft, personnel. So I mean, a couple of things that
not China at that point.
No, but some things did happen with China. China did allow them to free up they don't have an exact number, but we know roughly between 50,000 and 70,000 troops who had been serving in China from North Korean military. They were all let go back into the wild by the Chinese to go back and fight for their country. So what you then suddenly had was a bolster, an extra 70,000 troops who were also war-hardened troops, you know what I mean? They had just came from... And a combination of that with the tanks, with the aircraft, meant that North Korea were bitching through the country. I mean, they had forced the coalition government of South Korea down to essentially the southern peninsula. They had forced them all the way down.
Right down into the southeast corner. I think by it was in late 1950, like by about October 1950 or whatever. Or no, sorry, it wasn't even as late. That was September 1950. They were right down the southeast corner. They pushed them all the way down because they had tanks, they had military backing from Russia, and South Korea had been asking the US for the same. They'd been asking for tanks in the lead up to this, and the US had flat refused them. But in September, when they saw how badly it was going, and obviously with the strategic importance of it and with their fear of the rise of communism, there was a UN vote for UN forces, which was largely US forces, but also had some from the UK and stuff.
86%, I believe. 86% of
my wife's granddad fought in Korea for the British Army.
86%
was a prisoner of war for 2 years.
Imagine the Scran was alright.
You imagine the Scran was alright? Don't think it was.
Alright, I just kind of presumed.
It was starvation rations. They don't treat prisoners of war very well. Anyway.
Good off one. But yeah, so weirdly what happened then though is at the same time there's the Security Council, the UN Security Council, America forced a change to the UN Security Council that essentially then meant from that point on that in the event the Security Council didn't agree with America, now that's not how it works, but essentially it's if they couldn't come to an agreement quick enough, then America can just act on its own accord out with what the Security Council...
because Russia were obviously against this happening.
Yeah. So Russia were just like, I don't really think that we should get involved with this because this is a thing purely between America and South Korea and Russia, China and North Korea, and it has nothing to do with anyone else.
Yeah, but also Russia weren't actually saying that though, were they? They were saying this is a civil war, it has nothing to do with us, while at the same time they were providing tanks and military resources. So Russia were being assholes as well.
Well, no, Russia were just doing what exactly we've done in every single fucking war since.
Yeah, okay. But I mean, as you know, the standard is the same on both sides.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that one was worse than the other, but the outcome of it was a change was made that essentially...
it was a proxy war, basically. It was a proxy war.
I mean, this is essentially the precursor to the Cold War. I mean, this is the precursor to essentially Vietnam. It's the precursor to everything else that happened in that region that then eventually up being what was the Cold War that we all had to deal with. And I say we all had to deal with. I didn't. But we as a nation had to deal with it. The times were rough. I remember being born and the wall collapsing. So they made a change. There was a resolution that essentially said they were allowed to just fucking overrule anything that the UN said anyway.
And then so they landed in the southern, southeastern portion of Korea, and by later,
UN forces actually came in midway through as well, which cut off supply forces to the North Koreans who were fighting at the front lines. Well, we were fighting essentially the actual war against them in the southern peninsula, and that allowed them to gain traction and reclaim.
Yeah, and basically by the within a month they had managed to retake South Korea right up to the 38th parallel, which is where the DMZ sits at present.
I mean, all of this that we spoke about kicked off over the course of about a year and a half, like all of it entirely.
I was feel like 50 to 52.
Yeah, by the time 52 came, though, it was completely done, and by 50 was when it kicked off. It was about a year and a half of actual war.
Well, yeah, and all the territory was gained in the first few months, like back and forth, and then for a good year and a half, there was like gradual little increments of gain and loss around about the 38th parallel, at which point there was a kind of a truce signed.
Yeah, which is weird because another thing is there was never
a peace treaty
signed. Essentially, officially,
North
Korea and South Korea are still at war, which is another thing that you have to remember when we're talking about the intricacies of the interactions between the two countries, that they are still two countries at war as far as official documentation goes. The reason that we've told you all of this, the reason that we've done this background is to get a bit of an understanding of where Korea came from, what it is to China, what it is to Russia, what it is to America, what it is to the rest of the world, and where it's been, and what kind of shape the entire country that we're dealing with, because it's not as black and white as there's a totalitarian government in charge of North Korea who is just persecuting all their people.
I mean, if you put it in that terms, it is as black and white as that, but the fact is that there's been a totalitarian government in Korea since then up until now, and at no point has anybody intervened in it. So the argument that is why
that's
you might
not the
intervene
reason.
now.
It's not a humanitarian scenario. I mean, and you could even actually go as far, and what we're going to move on to now is a couple of hilarious things. We use that term loosely, but like when we're talking about the sanctions and stuff, like we've been imposing sanctions on a country for so very long, that if there was a humanitarian problem,
but we've been imposing sanctions on them and also giving them massive aid. But before we get to the sanctions, we should probably look at what's happened in the intervening years since the Korean War has subsided, came to a truce. You know, there's been no military action as such between South Korea and North Korea. That's not strictly true, but there's been no major war.
There's not been a war.
Yeah. For example, in the 70s, there was, during very early in Richard Nixon's presidency, and while the US were in Vietnam, a spy plane was shot down over North Korea, a US spy plane.
I believe it had around 24.
31
was
people
it 31?
were killed.
Oh yeah, so was it 24? Anyway, I can't remember the specific numbers, but essentially, yeah. So 31 people, so 31 US military personnel were killed in a plane, intentionally were shot down by North Korea, and that never escalated to war with North Korea. That's something to put into perspective when you're talking about, you know, like, granted, they are doing nuclear testing at the moment. Granted.
It was 1969. I think I said the 70s there, but it was 1969.
So there was no Creedence album out that year.
Right, okay.
Just you know. That might have been the reason.
Maybe, yeah, they were just pissed.
They were waiting for, maybe they thought, anyway. When we're talking about the ICBMs, we're talking about the nuclear testing, like, what would be classed as an absolute direct act of war didn't escalate to war. Now, granted, at the time, there was a honor system going on, which was North Korea had both Russia and China as big communist powers standing behind them still at that point, who were already in various proxy war clashes with America.
Oh yeah, Vietnam was ongoing at that point. Nixon, I think, eventually made the decision that he didn't want to go into Korea again because it would have led to direct.
They would have lost the Vietnamese War.
Well, but obviously by '69 they knew how well that was going for them, and they knew that there would be support for North Korea from China and Russia, and there was obviously a large amount of tension at the time. So they chose to do basically nothing. Apart, they did sanction him via the UN, and there's a history of that. Now,
there's an argument to say as well that the American people just simply wouldn't have backed another war in Korea, like at that point.
Yeah,
like just the failures of Vietnam and the amount of people that were coming back and talking about what they had witnessed, what they had seen, and the fact that they were going to fight a losing war.
And the amount of anti-war sentiment there was towards Vietnam and America at the time too. But there's evidence to support the argument that appeasement of North Korea is what's led us to the current situation, perhaps. But
the fact that none of the points that they've gave an active reason to invade or an active
reason for some sort of military, like airstrikes, or
even genuine humanitarian input, like as in like military dictated humanitarian input, where it's like, we're going to put in humanitarian aid. We're not letting you. No, I don't think you understand. We're going to put in humanitarian aid because of the way that the people are.
North Korea have allowed humanitarian aid throughout the 90s, 2000s, and up to the present day, but they have controlled.
Yeah, controlled humanitarian aid and humanitarian aid aren't really the same thing. I mean, like, I can give you £1 million and tell you to give it to your kids, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you will give that money to your kids.
You can keep this fucking money secret, Paul.
It's what keeps me going. It's just enough to tick over. But yeah, but it doesn't mean that you're going to give that money to your kids. You know what I mean? And it's by the same grounds. It doesn't matter what humanitarian aid you give to North Korea. You can't guarantee that they're giving it to North Korea.
No, but I mean, you could argue the same about much of Africa
but
at various points over the years that we've been giving money to like extremely corrupt regimes in African country as aid to their people.
But I do argue that. I do argue that as well. Like, I argue the fact that you can't do that.
Do you think we should have strategically, militarily went into, say, Uganda, or Rwanda, or Somalia, or Ethiopia at various times in the last 20 years?
Both us and France should have actively stopped making them pay reparations for the fact that we imperialistically stole the country after them in the fucking first place, and it wouldn't have been a problem. That's a different episode.
Get rid of third world debt.
Yeah, essentially, that's a different episode. I mean, right now, for example, and just since you asked that question, France makes various countries in Africa pay them money to let them rule themselves, but still be owned by France. That's ripping the cunt, right? I mean, right there, that's like, I will let you pay me to not enforce my will, but I still own you.
I don't know enough about that, to be honest.
It was actually a podcast I was listening to recently, was talking about it.
Right.
We'll get to that, and I'll provide information on that just as a side note. But yeah,
so you had that in the 70s, and like the precursor to that spy plane being shot down was that the previous year North Korea had captured the US spy ship as well, USS Pueblo, and had held 80 crewmen hostage at a prison camp too. So like North Korea were doing shit to piss America off at that point in history, but obviously they knew they were in the position where they had military backing from the Soviets and from China, and also they had backing of a technological agricultural supply type scenario, nature coming from these countries as well. With the fall of the Soviet Union in the 90s, Korea, and with the sort of change of regime in China, moving away from communism, more opening the country up to the money markets and to a bit more westernisation.
Modern communism as China essentially operates in now, which is like not really communism.
Not at all. No.
But they will still claim to be communist.
Yeah. So they then found themselves isolated and without that supply chain coming to them, so they weren't getting the fertilizers they needed, they weren't getting the industrial backup that they needed, and
I mean the leadership as well is a big part of this. Essentially, you've went from having a strong military-minded leader in the form of Il Sung,
right,
and you've then went to his son, who has grown up as a child of a strong military leader, but no,
in a totalitarian country
where he is already king or divine, and he's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
they're like lauded as demigods.
yeah. So that creates a very different leader who's taking charge of the country. Do you know what I mean? Like he's not making decisions based like he's never known a hardship. He's never fought in the front lines. He's not got any of this type of experience. And
no, and what his whole mindset is based upon is keeping him and his family in charge.
Keeping the lineage going, keeping them as the supreme leaders, as they use their terminology,
and preventing US or South Korean intervention into their country. So they have, like, from a strategic point of view, it obviously makes perfect sense for the leader of North Korea to want their country to be as militarily strong as possible. In fact, there's obviously a big argument that that's the only reason why they are still in charge of that country. If they hadn't done so, if they'd chosen to spend their money on, say, agricultural technology or technology to extract the quoted 10 trillion worth of mineral
and
assets.
We'll get to that at some point there as well. But yeah, I mean, there's an argument to say that the country had been straight up fucking taken off them by now, or invaded, or their leadership would have been overthrown, or there would have been a democratic election, because the only reason they have control over the masses in North Korea is the fact that everyone is, in the grand scheme of things, relatively poorly educated, in extreme poverty, malnourished. It's really difficult. It's really easy to gain the sentiment for uprising. It's really difficult to create an uprising when everybody is kept stupid and starving.
Well, and again, the only way, like in no other government type, in a democracy, in a Western democracy, you would not get away with treating your people the way that North Korea get away with treating their people, in terms of the malnourishment and everything else which they have to suffer, the censorship, blah, 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 blah. The only way to enforce that is through a complete totalitarian state, because otherwise the people would revolt. There's evidence that they are, I mean, if you look at the defectees, especially from the military to South Korea in the past year, it's went massively up. Now, I read an article the other day that was saying there's no proof as yet that it's statistically significant. It will depend on what happens in the next year. If they continue to see an increase or certainly raise numbers, then that would constitute evidence that there's a lot of unrest in the country. And again, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but there's an argument that perhaps that's part of Trump's master plan.
Those words don't deserve to be together.
Yeah, man, we're unbiased. We're supposed to be unbiased.
Aye, we are unbiased, but I don't think it's being biased to say that Trump's an idiot.
Well, but there are people who think he's a master negotiator and an extremely successful businessman.
Is that not idiots though? Because we know that he's not a successful businessman. We can see he's we can't see his tax forms because he won't release them, but because he's old tax forms, and we've seen
fake news.
Nice. But yeah, we kind of got ahead of ourselves. The other thing I would like to say at this point is remember that at the tail end of the 80s, start of the 90s, it's also reasonable to say that the kind of the political ideologies of North Korea are kind of non-existent. It's now not a left-wing or right-wing government. It's now not, it's now not anything. It's just an autocratic, totalitarian regime. You know what I mean?
Which exists purely to look after the ruling,
about 19 people at the top.
Well, the ruling family and following that, the ruling party.
Yeah.
And anybody outside of that sort of sphere is treated as a second-class citizen at best.
And that makes a massive difference to the way that they handle what happened in the 90s, which is a flood, essentially. There was flood and famine, which started in mid-90s, 90.
Well, the flood came in the mid-90s, but the paper that I read, which was by, now this is going to sound bad when I say this, it was by the US Committee for Human Rights in North Korea, but they're a total non-government or they're non-party affiliated body in America, and there's a lot of good data in there. Now this study was published in 2005, so it's a bit out of date, but it covers the sort of 90s into the 2000s, the best of any information that I could find, which is when the famine started in North Korea. And North Korea officially asked for help around 1995, asked for humanitarian aid, etc. But the evidence was there that from 90 onwards, and basically from the fall of the Soviet Union, their ability to produce the food that was required in the country dropped off massively, and obviously the policy decisions of the North Korean government, they didn't choose to spend the budget that they had on more food for their people. They chose to continue to pour it into the military to, you know, to keep them secure in their position as heads of the country.
Now, this is where the view of the way that different things are becomes a bit more difficult, because you've obviously got, there is one side of the argument that is the government were spending their money on their military and they should have been spending it on their people. There is another side of the argument to say the government had to spend it on the military because they felt so threatened by external forces.
But that's an argument which, you can make that they had. I mean, strategically, I grant you, it makes sense, but that doesn't make them less cunts.
I'm not saying they're right for doing it, but what I'm saying is a decision.
That was the
less
English.
Wasn't, no, I'm not saying that they're right for doing it, but what I'm saying is it's a very different decision to just choose that you're not going to spend the money on the people, rather than making a decision that you feel you can't spend the money on the people.
Okay, right, but here is where they make a terrible policy decision, which is willfully destructive towards their people, when they are granted the aid from everywhere else, basically, and actually the US is the single largest donator of aid to North Korea in the past 20 odd years.
It's US, China and South Korea, essentially.
Yeah, but the US gave them the most. At the time of this paper, they had given them 600 million out of a total of I think it was 1.8 billion that they'd received, and in that period, I think US are now looking at above $1 billion that they've given to North Korea.
4 billion all in worldwide is what they're looking at is being provided.
But when that aid started to come into North Korea, they dropped the amount of the budget that they were then spending on food. Rather, if they'd kept it the same plus the aid, there would have been enough to feed the people. But they used the aid coming in to subsidise their military, to go, oh cool, well we can just take that money away from food now and put it towards the military.
So is that just a poor fiscal decision?
It's just a poor, awful humanitarian decision.
It is, absolutely.
They're not nice people.
I mean, I think everyone is aware of that. It's just sometimes you have to look at it from a devil's advocate point of view.
Well, I will completely agree that strategically, if you are putting yourself in the shoes of Kim Jong-un, and prior to him, his father,
Il-sung. Kim Il-sung.
No, Kim Il-sung was the grandfather. Who was the one in between again?
Kim Jong-il.
Yeah, Kim Jong-il. Fucking hell, right. If you put yourself,
there's been a lot of this over the last 6 weeks.
If you put yourself in their shoes, then strategically it obviously makes sense to have a strong military. But I mean, nothing else that they do in terms of their philosophy towards the world really makes sense to me as a human being.
But that's because you're not a autocratic supreme leader ruler who really, 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 really wants their palace to stay shiny.
True, that is true.
So it makes
can't argue with that.
So it makes it difficult for you to. And the thing is, again, I can't get it straight. I'm not saying that it's okay in any way, shape, or form the way that they've operated. All I'm saying is there is external factors that have made certain decisions more likely to have occurred, which is the sanctions, the fear of war, essentially the building up of the military.
And the military is quite frightening. I mean, there's a few things about North Korea which we haven't mentioned so far. Number one, if you look at it in the night sky outside of Pyongyang, there's no fucking electric lights. Like it's backwards in a most ridiculous level.
By backwards, he means people don't have electricity.
It's not technologically advanced, right? When you compare it to the country direct south, which is,
arguably one of the most, or certainly up there with the most technologically advanced countries in the entire world.
I mean, it's a thriving economy. It's got the 3 biggest shipyards in the world. It has companies like Hyundai and Samsung and Daewoo who make fucking everything.
Samsung are arguably the largest electronics company in the world. They're certainly up there.
And also they're making big, massive fucking boats for everybody. Like I've been to South Korea. I've worked in Gyoji. I've seen the Samsung shipyard. I've seen the fucking the SME Daewoo shipyard. They're like 3 of the biggest shipyards in the world are in South Korea. It was previously the 3 biggest in the world, but I think some of the Chinese ones might be up there now as well. But it's unbelievable to stand up on a hill and look at literally hundreds of hulls being in various stages of progress being built in front of your eyes, and these things are like oil tanker size. They're enormous. The shipyards that they have there are unbelievably big and efficient, you know, in terms of just the steelwork and stuff like that. It's fucking unbelievable. So you've got that thriving economy directly to the south of them, in pretty much the same geographical position as them, and then up north you've got a city, state with light and everything, and outside of that you've got fuck all. You have a situation whereby people are not only starving but terribly malnourished, and we have evidence from some of the defectors that have came over to South Korea and even in the past few weeks, but certainly over the past 10-15 years, that they are like full of parasitic worms.
There's a video.
Yeah, it's not nice.
There's a video that if you can, we'll provide a link to it, but I will say that only watch it if you think you can stomach it, because it is easily one of the grossest things I've ever seen in my entire life. And
like I see there were medical professionals saying that they'd only seen shit like this in textbooks. Like they were like pulling 15 fucking worms out of people. And these worms,
I see like a bucket of worms getting pushed out in intestines, like a bucket of worms. Like.
And these worms tend to only be found in humans when human waste and feces is being used as a fertilizer on the crop. So that's what they're using to fertilize their paddy fields and stuff over there, and that's then leading to these infections. And they're easily cured by like really cheap fucking pharmaceuticals as well, but you can't get them.
Yeah, I mean there's talk from female military defectors saying that they are so malnourished that they don't have their periods, for example. They don't menstruate at all because they don't have any food, and their bodies are so malnourished that they don't go through cycles anymore. There's also other issues that are standing, like systematic rape of many females in the military and stuff. And the thing is, you have to join the military.
Yeah, so, it's like national service, and they have like a 1 million standing military. Like
they have the longest. They have the longest amount of time that you have to perform national service for as well than any other country in the world. So you're essentially legally required to be in the military and be you're malnourished anyway. But
and actually, the military are probably are better fed than the general populace.
You would imagine so. I mean, you would imagine
that's what it says in pretty much all the literature I've read.
Again,
I mean, you need to take. That's the thing, but.
It's very difficult. It is very difficult to, when you're researching the country, it's really easy to find out history. It's really easy to find out kind of short anecdotes from random people that may or may not exist. But it's very difficult to find facts.
I've seen actual interviews, but obviously it's translated and stuff. But that, like, I mean, you could get to the stage where you didn't believe anything you ever read, you know what I mean? You have to have some sort of trust in the ability of some journalists to be doing their job properly.
It's not that. It's specifically, I don't doubt that people are reporting what they can report. I just doubt the information that you can actually get from North Korea. It's very difficult to get into North Korea. It's very difficult to get out with information they don't want you to get out from North Korea.
Well, and even people who have snuck information out. There's nobody sneaking out any positive news stories from North Korea apart from North Korea, apart from their own press office.
I don't disagree. That all I'm saying is no one, like, there's some people sneaking out information, but there's not that much information that is snuck out in North Korea in the grand scheme of things. Not if you compare it to literally any other fucking country that we're at war with or we've been at war with in the entire world. Do you know what I mean?
And as a point of balance, like there are articles where they're speaking to defectors who want to return to North Korea because they don't feel that they fit into South Korean society, and they think it's a very lonely existence, and they think that there's no sense of community in a sort of modern civilization. And they said that they would rather be starving but be friends with their neighbours and know them and speak to them and look after them than their existence in, you know, a South Korean urban environment.
Is that like harken back to the good old days?
Back to the good old days.
Just, you know, like
the fucking good old days. I don't know why. I think that's actually a Frankie Boyle thing. I just ripped off maybe. But yeah, maybe. But also maybe, I suppose on balance to that, there are many long-term prisoners that say that they are institutionalised and can't fucking function in the normal world and want to go back to jail. So,
yeah, I mean, like almost like a Stockholm syndrome type scenario where it's like you've left, but then you really love your captor.
Yeah, like how come the leader of South Korea's never got like 9 holes in one in a golf round?
Aye, he's too busy. He's too busy leading his country and not fucking getting right good at golf.
That was Kim Jong-il's first ever round of golf. He got 9 holes in one. That's pretty impressive. Like,
that's why he's the supreme leader.
Yep.
So with all that being said, there is certainly a undertone in the media suggesting that, you know, North Korea is a pretty shitty place to live. So what have we, the Western world, done to aid it being a shitty place? So, for example, we spoke about sanctions earlier on. What sanctions have North Korea got imposed on them?
Okay, so I mean, so there's a wee bit of background to this. Originally, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which is North Korea's official name, were part of the original signees on the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 1985. They signed up to it. 2003, they withdrew and began to develop nuclear weapons.
It's not the best method.
No. Wear a cap. Or a safety helmet in case you get
Nuked.
Yeah. Duck and cover. So in 2006, then the UN passed a resolution condemning that their first nuclear test and imposing sanctions, which included like supply of heavy weaponry, missile technology, material, etc. They, in 2009, strengthened sanctions after their second nuclear test. In 2013, they passed a couple of resolutions condemning a satellite launch in 2012 and proliferation activities, and they put in higher sanctions after their third nuclear month in the March. And they've basically racked up to the point that I can tell you that UN sanctions right now include the following: ban on trade of arms and military equipment, machinery, material, and dual-use technology. Don't know what that fucking means.
Dual-use technology?
I guess
they can't use like they can't sell you like a TV screen that can also be used as a computer monitor.
Yeah, I'd say it's more things that can be used for other stuff, but also for nuclear weapons. You know what I mean? Maybe certain types of PLCs and stuff like that. Cell rate equipment and stuff that you could use on nuclear.
Aye, like a rocket engine. A rocket engine can be used for a rocket, but could also be used for an ICBM.
Yeah, stuff like that, right? Asset freezes for individuals involved in the country's nuclear program, a ban on certain luxury goods and natural gas imports, a ban on statue, coal, mineral, iron, seafood and textile exports. That first one was statues, so they are not allowed to export statues.
Well, that's only because,
as we all know, North Korea make the world's best statues.
Well, I was actually going to say that you don't want every cunt having a statue of Kim Jong-un in this.
But it just does.
Nobody else is making them.
Seems like a random
I
one.
also now see a hole in the market, Jerry. I'm going to start making Kim Jong-un statues because I know they're not coming from North Korea. So somebody's selling them.
Good plan. You should go on Dragon's Den with that.
It's good. Seafood as well. Seafood's a weird one that they're also not allowed to. That's what you did say there. Seafood, yeah. Not allowed to trade seafood.
I think China would buy a lot of seafood from North Korea, so they're not allowed to. They still do though. And in fact, one of the things we didn't mention earlier on is with the collapse of the Soviet Union, it meant that basically Korea could no longer operate as a communist country, so they had to allow marketization of the economy to come from the bottom up. So they allowed black market dealings in food and stuff that people needed to survive, basically. And they now basically goods are bought on the open market. There's a certain amount of rations and whatever that are provided by the central distribution,
the state.
Yeah, but that very much depends on where you geographically live and how close you are tied to the party.
Is that not still the Korean Flood Agency?
The Korean Flood Agency, or I can't remember the exact name, I'll find it and we'll put the link up, is what they changed the name of the body which dealt with income and humanitarian aid to in the mid-90s, and it's still called like the flood fucking help agency or something similar.
Something that's more marketable.
Yeah, that'd be a terrible name. But yeah, they basically still trade off the fact that they had a big flood in the mid-90s as their prime reason for requiring humanitarian aid.
Slade still trade off the fact that they had a big song in the 1970s though, so you know what I mean? Like,
well, I mean, the Christmas song, surely. Where we all know Come On Feel the Noise is a better actual tune, like. But I mean, realistically, if I was a musician, I would definitely try and write a Christmas song.
Definitely.
Because I reckon the Pogues must fucking cream themselves every year when they see the royalties flooding in for like Fairy Tale in New York.
And then cream themselves.
They know that Kirsty's not getting any.
And then cream themselves when they watch it all get drank at the other side. So it's like, can you stop drinking?
The EU also have economic restrictions on North Korea. They ban admission and residency of persons who have facilitated their weapons program, and they deny them access to specialised training in the EU, and they prohibit export of luxury products ranging from purebred horses to ski equipment.
So once again, we have to look at that. So you can trade mongrel horses.
Yeah. Like you could get donkeys and shit, and they bother.
I don't think that's a mongrel horse. I think that's a donkey.
Well, okay, like an ass or a mule.
Right.
Or just not a thoroughbred horse.
Just not a thoroughbred horse. So essentially, as long as Shergars know it's da, then it's fine.
Yeah. They're not allowed to buy like Red Rum or fucking Amberley House or any of the winners of the national or racing horses, but they can have just a bog standard shitty horse. I don't know how they.
Seems like a weird rule.
No Clydesdales. I don't know if they're allowed like pit ponies or fucking Shetlands or whatever.
And no ski equipment.
But they can snowboard like fuck.
Just like they can. Ice skating is massive in North Korea.
The US also have their own specific.
They're not allowed to shift gold, aren't they? No, they're not allowed to, and they've got quite a big gold deposit, and they're not allowed to.
They're not allowed to export gold and stuff yet. There's also the newest sanctions, which literally happened like last week, are that their ability to import oil into North Korea has been reduced by 90%, which is obviously going to have a massive impact on their ability to generate electricity and heat and stuff like that. So,
at what point are you killing the people though?
Yeah, but so this is kind of what I was getting at earlier by suggesting that this was all. Some people believe this is all part of Trump's master plan, right? So if you look at the history of his campaign throughout, trying to become president, he has time and time again provoked North Korea by saying stuff about their military capability, by saying personal things about Kim Jong-un, and also by saying stuff like, we're going to rain down fire and fury on North Korea, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Why are we giving free protection to South Korea? China need to step up. There's been a lot of rhetoric and a lot of banging drums to suggest that he is the man strong enough to go into North Korea and do something about it. He insulted Clinton for not being strong enough. He's insulted Obama in the past for not being strong enough on North Korea. So
you mentioned Nixon.
No, I didn't bother.
Funny that.
But if you follow the logic of that, you could suggest that in going down the route of suggesting military intervention in North Korea, you back North Korea into a corner and you push them to increase their military spend, to increase the speed at which they are developing nuclear weapons, and you push them towards testing them more quickly and being more public about it in order to show military strength, which in turn leads to further UN sanctions, which in turn could potentially be the tipping point whereby there's a people's uprising in North Korea, and there's suggestions by things that people like Rex Tillerson have said about their discussions with China, which would suggest that they have sat down and spoken to China already about what would happen if there is some kind of military intervention in North Korea, or in the event that there's a regime change. America have a plan in place and have had a plan in place for many years of how to get in there quickly and disable all of North Korea's known warheads, and to ensure that they don't fall into the hands of the wrong people at the point of regime change. And China, according to some of the stories that you'll read, and again, we'll always share the links for this stuff, have basically said that they will allow America to do that.
Well, I would suggest that America, although the idea that Trump has some kind of master plan I find incredibly unsettling, it may very well be beneficial for America to move into North Korea.
Well, I would say that it would be beneficial for anybody to move into North Korea. And why is that, Paul?
Well, according to various resources, and to give you an idea, the resources in question are oilprice.com, mining.com, Business Insider. I mean, essentially non-affiliated, maybe not as much Business Insider, but non-affiliated reports from various different independent bodies suggest that North Korea's got about 10 trillion of untapped natural resources.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen this in mining.com, Forbes, the New York Post, Business Insider, and some Australian media, and an independent in the UK, yeah, saying that they have literally trillions of untapped mineral resources. So we're looking at, yeah, as you were saying before, the UN banned export of gold, vanadium, titanium and rare earth metals from North Korea. And in November, capped production of coal, banned shipments of nickel, copper, zinc and silver.
I mean, here, to give you an idea, the Egyptian government had seized 2,300 tonnes of iron ore that was being shipped by North Korea through the Suez Canal.
Yeah.
Because they were trying to shift the minerals that they could pull out the ground, and the sanctions don't allow them to do it. But I mean, essentially, there is wealth there.
They apparently have the second largest magnesite reserves in the world after China.
It's my third favourite Pokemon.
But it's also like, I mean, when you look at the size of North Korea in comparison to the geographic size of China, for them to have the second largest amount in the world is, obviously notable.
Since the 90s, their ability to mine, or certainly the production of their mining, has fallen by 30%.
And that harps back to what I was talking about earlier, with the fact that the Soviets and the
propping
Chinese,
that up.
they're not providing them with the technological backup that they require, and they're not able to, because they're directing so much in terms of their economic resources towards the military. It means that they're not able to spend time researching that stuff.
Weirdly, with all that iron ore, there was also 30,000 rocket-propelled grenades seized, which is the largest ammunition seizure in history of sanctions against North Korea.
Yeah.
Wonder where they were going. I bet I can probably guess.
Go on then.
Well, going to the idea of the Suez Canal, I'm guessing they were probably finding their way.
Hitting their way to Syria and that.
They were certainly some form of some IS affiliate. I can't imagine there's that many people fucking purchasing rocket propelled grenades in North Korea.
Yeah, I bet Russia was the middleman there though. Citation needed.
I'm so glad you said that there, because that's exactly where I was going next.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, absolutely trick. But yeah, so certainly that, obviously with their inability for them to be able to pull out, and just to give you an idea, you're talking about...
That's why they've got such a large population.
Coal, iron ore, zinc, copper, graphite, silver, magnesite, one I can't pronounce, they reckon between 6 trillion and 10 trillions worth. And that's from South Korean projections. I mean, that's from people who have probably got a relatively good understanding of the lay of the land and
literally what the geological makeup is. Yeah,
and that's almost a good enough reason to want a war to occur in North Korea. Do you know what I mean?
So you've got a situation where Trump's beating the drum for it. Kim Jong-un's ramping up nuclear testing. You have now, in the last week or so, you've had the UK Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson say the following. He's branded the country a massive threat and a real danger to Britain. Pressed on whether the UK is making preparations to deal with North Korea, Mr. Williamson said Britain has to step up. He has also said that it's not just a problem for the United States, it's a global problem. Britain has to step up in terms of dealing with it. There are threats emerging right around the world. Britain is a global player, it's a world player. We will never hesitate to deal with aggression and threats. That's what we've been known for doing in the past, and that is what we will continue to do. So you've now got a member of the British cabinet making warmongering statements. You've
got the Russians flying military jets across the border in North Korea out with any conversation with China, which has caused China to have to retaliate by flying bombers themselves across the same border to show their willingness to also deploy military hardware if need be. And it's been suggested, certainly in a CNN report, that China and Russia aren't fully seeing eye to eye towards that. Now, granted, that's from a CNN report, and it's kind of worthwhile for CNN to make people believe that China and Russia aren't seeing eye to eye. But certainly, going to the idea, there is a suggestion that China and America have certainly had discussions between each other, independently from Russia, regarding how they would interact in North Korea. The idea that Russia are wanting to show they're willing to act independently is possibly worthwhile. And on that note, they've actually cancelled $10 billion worth of debt from, like, it's essentially Soviet era debt to Moscow from North Korea, which puts North Korean books £10 million better off than they were in November.
Million or billion?
Billion, sorry.
Right, okay, that's more, obviously.
Yeah, sorry, that was
So that's money that North Korea will now probably spend on the military.
And maybe they spend it on food for the people. And
there's a distinct possibility that some of the military hardware that they're buying might be coming from China and Russia. It's certainly alleged that China have on regular occasions broke the sanctions between them, the UN sanctions that have been imposed upon them by doing business with North Korea.
Shit, man, I'm going to go out there and say that although this is going to be like prefixed with an allegedly, they're almost certainly buying weapons off of Russia. I mean, they're almost certainly buying weapons off of Russia.
I would agree with that. So with all the things that have happened in the past 60 years, and with all the times the helicopter being shot down in 1994, the US military helicopter that was shot down by the Koreans, the spy plane that was shot down by the Koreans, the spy boat which was picked up and 80 prisoners.
1994 US military helicopter that was flying across the demilitarised zone was shot down, and one of the pilots were kept as a prisoner for an amount of time.
So why has nothing ever been done about this? What basically the question I'm asking here is what would a military conflict with North Korea look like? What sort of casualties are we looking at? What sort of weaponry are they going to unleash? I mean, so
the thing is, the presidents that have been singled out by Trump has not been willing to act, and even the presidents who haven't acted, Trump hasn't mentioned. Nixon, Obama, and Clinton were all involved in fucking war, man. I mean, they were all like they were all involved in altercations in the Middle East. They were all, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like they were all involved in wars around the world. Like, it's not like they were light-handed with their use of the military going into places throughout the entirety of their presidencies.
But I think it's fair to say that they've went into places whereby the number of casualties that they could possibly incur are nowhere fucking near the amount of people that could potentially die in the event of a conflict with North Korea.
So they reckon that in 3 hours, North Korea, because of the way that, I don't know, their guns are pointed at the artillery that they've got, essentially...
this is just the normal artillery.
Yeah, so the standard artillery, not your nukes, not your anthrax and ICBMs or other made-up stuff that they're talking about now. They can level the entirety of Seoul. They can essentially kill everybody.
Well, so the thing I read was saying that they could hit every sort of square foot of the city of Seoul within the first 3 hours of a conflict. Yeah, the first 3 hours,
every single square foot. So essentially, pretty much, like, so when I said they could kill everybody, it's not obviously depending where they were standing, but fundamentally they could kill everyone in Seoul in 3 hours. They could
level the place.
They could turn it into dust.
So, but you could argue, perhaps cynically, that those aren't US citizens, they're South Korean, so maybe the US wouldn't necessarily be as concerned about that.
The financial implications of the shipyards you were talking being closed down, of Samsung's head office and Hyundai and all the other things, all these places being trashed. I mean, without actually being able to be 100% certain, I would imagine that there is money certainly coming from Samsung, if not the other major companies in South Korea, and finding its way directly into US Congress. You know what I mean? Like, I would imagine that there's a financial implication.
Well, I know for a fact that there's US money being spent to buy vessels being built there, but you could argue that those shipyards being destroyed could have, and not in the short to medium term, but a longer term positive effect on America if it gives them the opportunity to manufacture those vessels in country themselves.
I mean, I would point out that Britain used to be really good at building ships, and our last fucking super carrier that we built was literally built with a fucking hole in it.
No, but I mean, if you buy into Trump's rhetoric about, you know, making America great again, and, you know, building things there again, and bringing industry on and blah 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 blah, then you could see a potential that could be a positive, that could be viewed as a positive, depending on what light you're looking at it. You know, them losing the capability to do that, and even being in a situation where it's a war-torn country, could benefit America in the longer term. But that's way off on a tangent.
Yeah, I mean, that starts heading towards conspiracy scenario, and then the underlying question from all of that comes to is there a belief, do you as the listener believe that the US government would be willing to sacrifice the most populated city in the whole of South Korea to go into North Korea? Because that's what it actually comes down to here.
Yeah, and I don't think that they are, and that's why they haven't.
Yeah, I believe that that's the reason that there hasn't been a war with North Korea, because they know that that's what, I mean, the result. Well, if anything is shot, flown over, lands, goes anywhere near North Korea, the absolute result instantly will be as much destruction as they can put in South Korea.
Yeah, and North Korea is not going to be an easy country to go into. You know, you have a 1 million strong army, you have a lot of weaponry there, and you have now the possibility, which I'd say almost certainly would happen, if a military intervention happens between the US and North Korea, the first thing North Korea are going to do is send a nuclear bomb now to the US mainland, and by all accounts they have the capability to do that now. The only thing which they don't know for sure is if they have developed a warhead which is capable of surviving re-entry and keeping nuclear weaponry intact. But if they have that, there's nothing to stop them from firing a nuclear weapon at the US mainland tomorrow if they wanted to, which would lead to the biggest ever domestic loss of civilian life in America in its history.
And that's the thing. Like, I mean, like you'll see a lot of arguments online where it's just like, if they were to fire a nuke, we just nuke them back. It's like, but that still doesn't change the fact that, you know, like all of Los Angeles has been nuked. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, like that will never change that. Like, doesn't matter how many times you nuke the one populated city in North Korea, that actually matters to kill their leadership.
One other thing that we haven't even mentioned in terms of what North Korea have gotten away with over the past few years is the cyber attacks which allegedly happened, which were allegedly perpetrated by North Korea on the NHS in the UK, on 21st Century Fox, was it, which released the interview?
Yes.
And there's various other
essentially a pile of digital cyber attacks,
warfare,
digital warfare type stuff that again they're not held accountable for. And again, the only logical reason from looking at it, so providing you don't want to decide that there's some kind of overarching conspiracy behind it all, is essentially that any interaction with North Korea in a negative way is going to result in a whole shitload of people in South Korea being murdered. I mean, a whole shitload of South Koreans being murdered.
But that then leads to North Korea essentially viewing America as a bit of a paper tiger. You know, they can roar and they can threaten, but nothing ever happens, so they can continue to push their luck.
Like, nobody, like anyone with any sense is aware that unless, and in fact, I was going to say unless North Korea uses a nuke on mainland America, but I would even go as far as to say that even if that did happen, the chances of a nuclear retaliation back to North Korea is so incredibly slim.
I utterly disagree. I think
so?
I think it would happen immediately, yeah.
I think that there's too much of a danger of there being a knock-on effect to both China and Russia.
I disagree. I think it's easy to justify using nuclear weapons against North Korea if they use them first.
I'm not saying that it's not easy to justify.
I think that
you couldn't justify it to China or Russia, so there's going to be a knock-on effect and fallout.
I disagree. I think actually China and Russia could easily be appeased in this situation if there is an agreement that the mineral wealth would be split 3 ways. However,
the mineral wealth is going to be worth fuck all for
that's what I was going to
150
say.
years.
Yeah. If you're using nuclear weapons, then that obviously makes a difference to that.
If you have poisoned any area of China, well, because mostly China, but even a tiny little bit of Russia that's at the end there, but with nuclear fallout, because you've retaliated, because you've retaliated and you don't need to. That's the thing. Like, America have enough firepower and weapons that they could level the entirety of North Korea without using nuclear weapons. And that's where it falls down to. I just can't perceive a scenario where a nuclear weapon would be fired at North Korea from any other country, because the outcome will be you are almost certainly going to have to appease or go to war with China and Russia because of the knock-on effect to their countries.
I can see where you're coming from, but I think China and Russia would accept that had to happen.
I mean, the Chinese and Russians don't really care about their citizens for the most part.
Well, and there's also, like, you can't tell me for a second that if somebody fired a fucking nuclear weapon at Moscow, Putin wouldn't nuke the fuck out of them. Like, he absolutely would.
Oh no, I agree with that. I also agree with the fact that the following scenario would be that in the event someone like America was pissed off with it, Putin would be like, let's just go to nuclear war then with America. Whereas I don't believe America, maybe Trump, but I don't believe America with a level-headed leadership team in charge of their military.
This is the issue. You have an unpredictable actor in charge of America right now. Like, I'd say it's fairly easy by just going through a logical argument and looking at strategically what Kim Jong-un should or would do. It's fairly easy to predict his next move in any given scenario because his motivation is clear, it's self-preservation. Trump is a very difficult man to predict, and this isn't just my personal opinion. This is pretty much every nuclear weapons expert, every expert in North Korea, and every expert on the military in that area of the world have almost to a man have said exactly the same thing about Donald Trump.
The man who defined narcissism as a mental illness is even on record saying that he doesn't believe Trump is mentally ill, but he believes that he is a world-class narcissist. Like, he doesn't believe it's a mental illness, but he believes that he is a world-class narcissist. And the problem with that is, so there's a man who understands narcissism probably better than anyone in the entire world, and he looks at Trump every day and he says that he is a narcissist, not mentally ill, but that means that he is going to make decisions for Trump all the time.
Yeah.
And that's from someone who understands what it means to be a narcissist, you know what I mean? So he's going to make a decision solely based on Trump and Trump.
and the US have 6,800 nuclear warheads. Korea has 10 to 20 at the largest estimates. Russia has 7,000. Everyone else has 300 or less. And there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other countries that hold.
And I would take a stab in the dark and say all of them, give or take, are US ally countries anyway.
You've got France, China, UK, Pakistan, India, and Israel.
So Pakistan's possibly the
only
only
ones
one.
declared, and I think Iran might be developing them potentially.
Probably. I mean, I would take a stab in the dark and say the same people that were developing them in North Korea were probably working with Iranians to be developing them because, you know, you don't just...
They both have the most sanctions against them.
And you also just don't get fucking weaponized radioactive materials just that easy.
But what I'm saying is the US they own those nuclear weapons as a deterrent, and they have them for a reason. The moment that they don't retaliate to a nuclear attack, it's no longer a deterrent in any way, shape or form. They have to.
But what I'm saying is...
From a strategic military point of view, they have to retaliate.
But who is the deterrent to?
Anyone else who chose to develop nuclear weapons and use them against America.
But that's what I was just saying there. It's no particular... I mean, you can choose to develop nuclear weapons all you want, but getting the stuff that you need to make nuclear weapons, you don't fucking Amazon it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but North Korea have managed to do it over years. I mean, there's definitely an argument
we
that...
know they've been getting direct support from Russia and stuff, though. We know that.
Well, we don't know it, but it's likely.
We know that they did up until the 90s
yes,
anyway.
That's true. But they've been isolated for quite a long time. And there is definitely an argument that the right time to do something about the situation in North Korea was the mid-90s.
What, just after the fall of the Soviet Union, when they didn't have anything at all and you could have walked in?
Well, you wouldn't have walked in lightly, but certainly they would not... It's a benefit of hindsight, obviously, but they would not have become the problem that they are now.
They were dealing with a flood, they were dealing with other social issues. It would have been...
it'd have been a prime time to hit them, and you wouldn't have been dealing with a potential nuclear aggression. You know, you're now in a situation whereby you're looking at a situation where it's almost impossible to escalate a conflict with them without the loss of life of millions of people. I
mean, again, it is hindsight, but they actually now have a stronger Russia and a stronger Chinese hypothetical backing. I'm not actually saying China are going to take their side, but China right now to China in the 90s is a very different place, you know what I mean? It's a much stronger country now than it was 20 years ago.
And to the extent that the conflict in Syria has kind of been a proxy war between the US, UK, and Russia, North Korea would potentially end up being the same thing.
I would agree with that. I would agree that the problem you've got is exactly Russia. I mean, I would say Russia's actually... Because China play their cards very close to their chest, it's hard to tell. And like you said, the articles that we're going to provide are going to suggest that there has been an interaction. I'd say that Russia would be quite happy to use North Korea conflict as an escalated conflict, like as a proxy.
So what's the conclusion we're coming to here then? We don't think that the US will start a military action against North Korea, but could you see a strategic argument for trying to create insurgency within the country?
I think that's possibly the only thing that I could see. I mean, the problem you've got is if North Korea chose tomorrow to set off the guns on South Korea, they've lost their bargaining chip, because that's it. All they've really got to stand on is, I mean, obviously other than the possibility that they're going to nuke somewhere, but for the last 30 years, their bargaining chip has been the fact that they're going to murder thousands and millions of South Koreans. So they're never going to do that. America's never going to be the cause of war because they might do that. There's now nukes to just add another new thing into the mix, where even as something as basic as, we're talking about nuking America, what if North Korea just decide to literally drive a van down to South Korea and nuke Seoul? Do you know what I mean? Like, the devastation, what would occur worldwide? It'd be the first nuclear bomb that's been used since 1946.
Yeah, since the second one in Japan.
So, like, I mean, what it would do to the world would be absolutely catastrophic. So the only outcome that I can perceive is essentially creating an uprising. And the thing is, the US and the UK, they're pretty good at they're pretty good at, you know.
But it's difficult in a totalitarian state where everybody's being watched in the border. It's so difficult to get in. Like, it's not.
You're not dropping CIA in to train guerrillas in the mountains. You know what I mean?
No.
Like, or are you?
Who knows? Well, I guess we'll never know that. But you've got a situation where you have a former Chinese general is saying that a new Korean war could break out at any time between now and March. A retired military commander urges his own country to be prepared and take defensive action. So everybody is ramping up for something to potentially happen over there. And to be honest, before we started researching this episode, my position on this was that was a fantastical idea, that it was an exaggeration, that it wouldn't happen. But the more I've read about it, the more worried I am that potentially a conflict could arise there. And a lot of the articles you'll read would suggest it could almost happen by accident, because you have two people who would continue to escalate it and wouldn't want to be seen to back down.
Well, see, weirdly, I'm for the most part the opposite end of the spectrum, whereas I agree that it could accidentally happen just because of bravado more than anything else, or some kind of offshoot of that.
Is that not a ridiculous situation for the world to be in?
An awful place for us to be. But I mean, the more I look at it now, the more I think that there has been so many opportunities throughout history. Like, for example, we speak about the fact that they did have backing when they did have backing in the 90s or whatever, or in the 70s when they shot down the plane in Vietnam. But America and their allies.
They shot down the plane in North Korea, but they were also at war in Vietnam.
But they were in war in Vietnam. Do you know what I mean? They were already fighting the Russians, so it's not like it's not like we don't want to get into an altercation with the Russians. That was already happening. Like, it maybe wouldn't.
Yeah, but they weren't Russian forces fighting in North Korea. It was just Russian-backed forces.
But that's all it would have been.
Not
in
North
South
Korea, Vietnam.
But that's all it would have been in North Korea if they went in. Technically.
Yeah, but I think they were worried that it might get past that.
Oh no, and I get that, but the point is,
and which is basically the same sort of argument you're making right now. If North Korea nuked the US, could the threat of getting into a conflict with Russia prevent the US from retaliating? I don't think it would, but you're suggesting that maybe it could.
I think the danger for it disrupting ties between them and China is even more worrying to America. I mean, essentially, the way the world is moving at the present moment, the trade between America and China is probably the only thing that's going to keep America actually going for the next 10 or 20 years, because of just the way the world is now and the way that China has become a power.
That's a massive market.
Yeah, and the danger of having any knock-on effect if you've gave like 20,000 people radiation poisoning in China because you've nuked them when you didn't need to nuke them, when you've literally got enough. I mean, right now, or certainly just before Christmas, there was 3 US supercarriers with their full fleets in the Japanese Ocean.
Yeah.
They have enough. They reckon that they can run indefinitely. They can have planes in the sky all the time indefinitely with between the 3 fleets.
How would not nuking North Korea play in terms of your approval ratings within the US as the president? In the event that they have nuked a major urban environment like LA or New York or some other big population centre, to not retaliate in that in kind, would that not kill your approval rating?
It depends, but I don't think it would, because see, to be honest, like, see, without trivialising the situation,
We remember that obviously while there are lots of intelligent people in the US that might think along the same lines as you, we have also encountered a number of Americans online who would see that as an act of treason.
I hear what you're saying, but a US the US carrier fleets that are there right now, if they actually actively chose to, they could level the entirety of North Korea in about 2 days. I mean, like, if you're going for a no holds barred situation where you don't care about murdering everyone, man, woman, and child, whether they're innocent or not in North Korea, they could just fly all the bombers and all the stealth jets and all the fighters over the top of it from all the carriers that are there, and you could fire all the cruise missiles, and you could level the entirety of North Korea in a matter of days without having to fire a nuke. Like, and literally,
but
just
while that was happening, there
murder
would be at least hundreds of thousands of people being killed in South Korea by North Korean guns and potentially nuclear warheads, multiple nuclear warheads being fired at the US while that was happening. So really what we're saying is, we hope that this never happens.
It's fucking real shit. I'm not gonna lie.
Right, I think that pretty much covers everything that we have on North Korea. If we've missed anything, as always, get in touch with us. Get on the website, check out all the links and stuff for all the resources we have on the episode. Get in touch with us on social media. Please pledge to the Patreon if you enjoy what we're doing. We hope that 2018 we're going to be a lot more regular. Like, we've had a couple of times.
It's going to be full of fibre.
We've been a couple of times in the past 10 months since we started where there's been about 6 to 8 weeks between a podcast, which has been due to circumstances out with our control. But we certainly are hoping to plan a lot better and to make sure that we're getting stuff regularly out to you guys. We do put a lot of effort in, and more than anything, we want a bit of interaction from you. We want to know what you like, what you don't like. So, get involved in all that. Yeah,
get on to us and tell us what you want us to have a look at as well. If there's fake news that just, grinds your gears or gets under your skin, let us know, because, like, we look at stuff that we perceive as fake news. We look at stuff that we perceive as relevant and kind of important at the time. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, we only have the ability to look at so many newspapers and so many articles and so many things. And we have got both close friends and patrons that help us out with that send us over links and send us information, and we appreciate it so much.
Yeah, so if you ever see something you think, maybe the guys at Not Another Fake Newscast would be interested in that, we probably would.
Tag us in it, post it to us, take it to our Facebook. We've got a closed Facebook group for people who want to listen to us. You can get in contact with us through that.
We also have another sponsor, which is Cornerstone, who make great razors. You can get a whole box of stuff sent to you, and you get £10 off your first order. They'll send you stuff every month which you require for shaving. Products that you get with them are great. The razors are really good, and it's like a cool
ergonomically shaped handle that's got you can get some engraving on it at the back. You can choose whether you shave as regular as Jerry, which is much more regular than me, because I probably shave maybe about once a year.
But we'll post up the link for that as well. It's www.cornerstone.co.uk/fake news 10 to get £10 off your first order, courtesy of Not Another Fake Newscast. And we also have t-shirts to buy. We've had a couple of cool ones designed by one of our Patreons, Paul Robb. So you can get them on there too. And basically,
we'll have other links below the show, and we've got some good stuff coming in 2018.
Yeah, and thanks so much to everybody who's written us reviews on iTunes. We've had loads of great reviews from you. That is the one thing that you can do which will please us massively, which costs you absolutely nothing. So anybody who listens to this and enjoys it, please write us a positive review on iTunes. And
I know it's on iTunes, and I know that's a pain in the ass, but the thing is, what people probably don't tell you, and even when I listen to all the podcasts that I listen to, nobody really mentions, is iTunes provides the podcasts for everyone. See, all the things that you listen to, iTunes are the backbone that produces, that pushes out the podcast to all these places. So even if you use an Android phone, or even if you listen to it online, or you listen to it via YouTube or anything like that, if you can have an iTunes account, if you're willing to make one, or if you've got one already, if you jump on and your review is there, that's what matters. It pushes us up on there, and that changes the way that it's all pushed out to everyone else.
So thanks very much for listening once again, and peace out.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Bye-bye.